We continue to follow breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ, where Cleveland Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson facing a 6-game suspension with no appeal from the Players Association. We're still waiting to see if the league will do so. They've got a few days to do that. Browns coach Kevin Stefanski had started training camp last week that if Deshaun Watson would not be available, Jacoby Brissett is going to be the starter in the event of a suspension. So taking a look at the Browns depth chart, veterans like Watson and Brissett, Joshua Dobbs and Josh Rosen influxed and added into this group, with, of course, Baker Mayfield leaving for the Carolina Panthers in the offseason. Spartanburg, South Carolina, by the way, is where Josina Anderson is, and we'll be talking about that for just a little bit. But before we do, Josina, our NFL insider, joining us here, what more can you tell us about your understanding of the decision handed down by Sue Robinson today?
So Sue Robinson just moments ago conveyed her decision in the Deshaun Watson proceeding to the relevant parties. And we have all heard since then that it is for 6 games. And this is after her independent review of the evidence from both sides relative to this case. Her review of thousands and thousands of documents of evidence from both sides as well. And this is where she has placed her flagpole on the spectrum of potential discipline, rather. And so this right here also just lets us know kind of how she felt relative to everything presented in front of her. When you think about the fact that the NFL was going for an indefinite suspension and Deshaun Watson's side was advocating for 0 games. So she is just to the other side of that relative to the median with respect to the duration of a year long, and also obviously 0, right? So I think that gives you some indication. And as you kind of hear some of the reaction just on social media, what have you, some people are relatively surprised. Some people feel like this is a good sign for Deshaun Watson and the Browns. Obviously, there are some people who are upset by it. But what's interesting now relative to the process is that both sides, presumably, at least per the process, have the ability to appeal to the commissioner, though we heard last night via statement from the union that Deshaun Watson and the union, as of that statement, intend to abide by the ruling of Sue Robinson and not appeal for the sake of underlining what they feel should be the maintained neutrality of the process and what they fought for in this version of the CBA in comparison to what it was before, when Roger Goodell was the judge and the jury. So that's what they're trying to underline. But we are now waiting to see if the NFL will make a decision to appeal to the commissioner, ironically, whether they feel like there should be an adjustment or modification to the ruling based on the evidence that they presented in the arbitration hearing. So we will see. But some other quick reaction, behind the scenes, just from a leak source, one of the things that I heard somebody tell me is they felt like Sue Robinson's ruling was more representative of a moderator and not an arbiter. So very interesting to hear that. And I think that people are still, matter of fact, I know based on what they're telling me, still waiting to read the full decision from Sue Robinson and to fully grasp the logic behind her ruling and philosophy behind that. And I think we just kind of have to wait and see just to make sure that everything is going to proceed the way we heard it last night.
That's exactly where I was going to go, because a lot of people are asking how and why she got to the 6 games. What's the process there? Is she going to release something written? Is there a protocol in terms of when she has to maybe make that available to journalists and obviously fans to learn about?
So a couple of things that's very interesting. If you're reading the new language in the CBA, so basically right now, if we're going along the word of the NFLPA and their intentions as of last night not to appeal, then per the CBA, the NFL has 3 days to submit a written appeal to Roger Goodell, and then the response would come 2 days after that. So if they are going to do that, the clock is about 5 days on that, right? And then the other interesting thing relative to her decision to to do 6 games. We all have to wait to see the written language in the decision, but at least in the personal conduct policy, in the discipline section, there is language about a baseline of 6 games when certain aspects of discipline are included in the type of quote-unquote violation, like if there's some sort of, at least per the language in the personal conduct policy, if there's some sort of violence, or if it is related to a sexual misconduct, for example, in nature. Now, obviously, one of the things that did come out, at least prior to this decision, per the reporting that we had, and also others, that backed that up as well, that the NFL didn't present any evidence of physical force or coercion or things like that. So it'll be interesting to see, very much so per the language in the personal conduct policy, in the baseline that they could have when the violation is related to sexual misconduct or the allegations of such, and whether her decision is based on that being invoked or if it just comes from something else based on her reasoning. Because as we know, the language in the personal conduct policy is very the language in the personal conduct policy is very broad, and you could be found to have been in violation of that simply for being irresponsible.
All right, looks like that generator, maybe your light is out, but we still got you, Josina, so we're going to keep you on if we can, as long as we can,
no
and we'll look at we get
problem.
that on for you. What's your understanding of what he can participate in now that we know, of course, he's going to be missing 6 games, preseason, during the season? What's the latest on that front?
So, per my understanding, and I don't have this all the way for sure, just because it is a relative new process, but my understanding is, as we are going through the potential appeals process, that he would still be allowed to participate. I know that once he is on officially the commissioner's suspended list, that on the back half of whatever that suspension is when he could then come back and participate. Now, what I have been trying to clarify relative to this new process is if the player, that being Deshaun Watson, gets placed on the commissioner's suspended list immediately, or if that is done right at the start of the regular season relative to the conclusion of the appeal process. That's the only part that is not clear for me right now.
So we have been sort of learning about the salary structure that the Browns have anticipated this with, Josina, and obviously also looking for insurance. They had one in Baker Mayfield, the former top overall pick. Again, he's now with the Panthers where you are again. How do you best describe sort of the front office and what they were doing in anticipation of getting Deshaun Watson and the way that they've done things in lieu of what we're seeing today?
So obviously much has been made of Deshaun Watson's record contract, getting a 5-year, $230 million deal, record in the nature of the total, record in the nature of the fact that it is fully guaranteed. And obviously there was a lot of talk about the fact that the money that he's making for his 2022 compensation is only $1,035,000. And so a lot of people were wondering if the club rather specifically did that to mitigate the amount of money that Deshaun would lose relative to the suspension in this year. Now, since that information came out about the contract, the club, that being the Cleveland Browns, has specified over and over again that that structure is something common to what they do for many contracts, not just Deshaun Watson. So that would be the answer to that. And that is true. Deshaun Watson is not unique in having the first year be dropped down to a minimum base salary, but it just coincidental, at least per the reasoning from the club, that it also helps to mitigate Deshaun Watson's losses.
Josina, I'll get you out of here on this. Again, we're talking about having journalists and insiders like yourself navigate through all this new language, navigate through the new protocol and the process. What are you looking out for here in the next steps and trying to learn more about Deshaun Watson and his status?
Well, I think the thing here is to see if the NFL is going to indeed appeal or not, and if by doing so undermine the arbitrator, that being Sue Robinson, in her first case underneath this process. Now, one thing I know about covering many of these cases over 10, 15 years relative to the old process, but still I think pertinent about the league, is that they are always, in my opinion, surveying the landscape of how people are reacting and getting the pulse and the optics out there. I'm sure that they will huddle behind the scenes at Park Avenue in New York. I'm sure that they're going to thoroughly go through her decision and the written ruling from Sue Robinson and make a determination from there. But my eyes will be on that as far as the NFL's decision. And then from there to double check and still make sure that Deshaun Watson's side is still indeed, although I just heard even minutes before doing this live shot for you guys that that was the intention. Although, like I've heard from sources, people are still waiting to read that in writing.
All right, Josina Anderson joining us again with the very latest. Josina, appreciate the latest information and the insight. Again, so many new moving parts that we are dealing with, and in a high-profile athlete, quarterback, face, and situation there with Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. Again, if all things hold and things do not change, Week 7 at the Ravens, and then followed up by the Bengals, and Monday Night Football would be the first 2 games for Deshaun Watson as quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. Also a trip back to Houston for the Texans back in Week 13 for a Browns team fighting with the Bengals, Ravens, and Steelers in the AFC North.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.